The question of charter schools and public schools continues to be a conversation about the ability for parents to choose. Margaret Fortune joins us in partnership with the American Leadership Forum to discuss the impact of charter schools closing the achievement gap for all students. Next on Studio Sacramento.
For over 20 years, Five Star Bank has created thoughtful solutions to help the capital region thrive. From economic development and education to public health and safety, issues that are vitally important to Sacramento's prosperity. We're proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
Margaret, 50 years after the creation of the charter school movement, how has the case for the existence of charter schools changed?
Well, I think that the initial impetus for charter schools, which was passed by Democrats, right, was the idea that charter schools would be the research and development arm of public education. But now, particularly for communities of color and urban communities, it really has become an alternative within the public school system that is not just about research and development, but about a mainstay for a high quality, college preparatory public education.
And you mentioned Democratic sponsored. One of the things that has changed is that originally there was broad bipartisan support for charter schools as part of the global educational reform movement. And now it almost seems as if, at least on one side of the aisle, the Democratic side of the aisle, that they tend to be the loudest critics of the charter movement. What happened?
Well, I think certainly it's true that teachers' unions tend to be the largest critics of the charter school movement. They had never in California been big supporters of it in the first place. And I think in our current political climate, and I'm going to say this is very recent because we've had Democratic and Republican governors that supported charter schools. Barack Obama supported charter schools. It was a cornerstone of his education agenda with Arne Duncan, who famously did his work in charter schools in Chicago. But there has been a political shift. It has been edged along by the teachers union. But you consider a state like California with a super majority of Democrats in the legislature, still even in this climate, a charter school moratorium didn't pass, that bill was killed, and a charter school cap didn't pass. Those things that would have significantly slowed charter school growth in the state of California were considered, even by the bluest of blue states, to be a bridge too far, which is an important signal, not just in California, but nationally.
What is the essential case that the critics are trying to make?
Well, I always let the critics make their own case. But what's happening in charter schools is that parents are getting choice. And
well, wait a minute. Let me make the case then, at least the little that I understand of it.
Okay.
And that is that charters drain resources from otherwise financially questionable districts that should be better invested in their own infrastructure rather than being siphoned off into independent charters. Secondly, that the results of charter schools at best is uncertain. How do you respond to those two assertions?
So if we look at our own local school district, Sac City, which is on the brink of bankruptcy, that has nothing to do, for example, with charter schools, even though people would make the political case that the financial crisis within many urban California school districts, Oakland, LA, has something to do with charter schools. What it really has to do with is something that we're all dealing with in public education, which is a decline in student enrollment due to a decline in birth rates, rising pension costs, rising costs of compensation that are multi-year agreements that go beyond what school districts can afford. In Sac City, for example, there are only 11 public charter schools.
Okay, understand all that, but speak to the case of uncertain results and that charters take away money that would be better spent on improving the infrastructure of the existing public school system?
I certainly would question and push back on the idea of uncertain results. Charters tend to do better with kids in urban environments and kids of color. So going back to your previous question about the politics of it, that's why you see that Black and Latino Democratic voters tend to support charter schools at high levels, because their students would otherwise be in low-performing district-run schools. In California, charter schools are public schools. It's a part of it's a tuition-free public charter school approved by a school board or a county board of education or by the state board of education. So these are local, mostly elected officials making decisions about approving charter schools to come into communities. And generally you see charter schools coming into communities where there's need. Charter schools are accountable because ultimately every 5 years that school's going to come up for review. And if the school hasn't kept its promises, then the school's closed. There are 781 low-performing schools in California, traditional public schools, that even though year after year, generation after generation, they continue to be low-performing, there is no provision, right, for a remedy like you have with charter schools. Those schools go on running, and typically the state response to that is more time and more money. So it's not that the state of California doesn't invest in traditional public schools. Most certainly it does. But what California policy says that even so, parents ought to have a choice. So what you have in this current debate, Scott, is a squaring off, really, of teachers' unions with parents who want a choice within the public school system. This is about parental choice. And that's why, Barack Obama, who's a president who uniquely got the challenges of urban America, agreed with that agenda, and so do the majority of Black and brown Democrats.
Well, some people say that it's about money, and that for-profit educators that are starting charter schools or operating charter schools are essentially, again, taking something that is supposed to be like a utility and a public good and turning it into just another widget producing business that doesn't necessarily have the best interests of children at heart.
Such an important question because it underscores a myth, right? That there are for-profit charters in California, which there are not. The legislature took action to outlaw for-profit charter schools. So charter schools are either run by school districts themselves or independently run by nonprofits. So we are talking about taxpayer-funded public schools when we talk about district-run schools and when we talk about charter schools, and it is about the money, right? The thing is that when a parent makes a choice to go to a charter school with their child, the money follows the child to the public school that serves the child. Now, I would call that fair, right? Those that are in the business of protecting student enrollment may have a problem with that. But I would contend that the best way to keep parents at your school is to serve their children well. So when we see that, for example, African Americans are overrepresented in charter schools, we have to look back at the data on how African American students are doing in district-run schools. And I'm here to tell you.
Do you have any of that?
Yes, I'm here to tell you, Scott, that 80% of Black kids in the state of California can't do math at grade level, and 68% can't read or write at grade level. So it's no mystery why those parents would seek to have something different for their child.
Do you have the statistics for African American children in charter schools to compare against that?
So I can tell you that for African American students in charter schools, they tend to have more time in English language arts and more time in math. And I will share the data for my own school.
Yeah, would love to hear that.
Which is a regional initiative to close the African American achievement gap right here in Sacramento. With our latest round of state test scores, we will exceed the county and the state average in mathematics by about 10 percentage points. And we have our students are 90% students of color and 85% low income, and we will match the county in English language arts. Now, that's significant because African American students are so far behind. At our last public hearing at the Sacramento County Board of Education, the board made a finding of fact that we had closed the gap for African American students in math in the county.
Really? A finding of fact on the record that you had closed the gap?
That is correct.
Tell us more about your schools. Give us the 30-second on Fortune Schools.
So our schools are designed to close the African American achievement gap by preparing kids for college starting in kindergarten. We have a little over 1,500 students. They're 90% students of color. Within that, it's 60% African American, another 27% Latino. 85% of our kids are eligible for free and reduced price lunch. And over 90% of our parents say that they are satisfied with our school, and 97% say that it offers an academically rigorous program. We're grades transitional kindergarten through 12, and our high school, which we opened 2 years ago, is a partnership with Cosumnes River College and Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. It's a STEAM-focused school, so science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, and the kids get their high school diploma and their associate's degree at the same time.
When they graduate from 12th grade?
When they graduate from 12th grade. So we sign our kids up for college, Scott, at the end of 8th grade. That's when they get their ID for Cosumnes River College, and then they start college classes in 9th grade.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's exciting.
So for those that go through your program and they come out with their AA, what do they do typically after they leave?
So we are not there yet. We don't have our first class of graduates yet. We will be a TK through 12 school system, and this coming school year we'll have our first 11th graders. But you may ask the question of, why is a Cal Poly San Luis Obispo partnering with a school in Sacramento? And it's because they're looking to diversify their student population. And schools like Cal Poly, which are among the most competitive in the nation, Cal Poly in particular feeds a lot of its graduates into high tech. So there's a lot of interest among high tech companies in diversifying their workforce in terms of gender and ethnicity. So they see a school like Fortune School as a pipeline into those professions. So what the promise that we're making to our students is that they will be competitively eligible for the college of their choice and for their dream job. That's what we're going for. And we have 3 simple rules. Listen, respect, work hard. And that emphasis on a work ethic is something for our scholars. We don't call them students, we call them scholars. And it's also something for the adults in the building to understand what we're striving for. Our model is based on, our education philosophy is the 5 pillars. So it's high expectations, choice and commitment, more time, focus on results, and citizenship. And going back to focus on results, to those math scores, because I threw out a lot of numbers. But the important thing to remember is that on average in the state of California on statewide assessments, kids in California will improve statewide by about 1% to 2% a year. That's what's normal. For Fortune School in math, we've been improving by 10 percentage points a year for the past 2 years.
And what grade level is that being assessed at?
The assessments start at 3rd grade, and then they go to the 8th grade, and then the kids pick up again with assessments in 11th grade.
So your numbers are sort of a global achievement level for Fortune Schools as a whole?
That's right.
Okay. And you mentioned that you closed the achievement gap with the county.
Mm-hmm.
So begs
in mathematics.
Mathematics. Begs the question, is the county's number a decent number to close to?
So the county's number is about, I want to say like 37%. The state is close to that in math. Fortune School's at 47%.
Wow.
So we are, and that's assuming that they, given that their growth is just about 1 to 2% in a year, that they stay about the same. That having a 10 percentage point gain, not just 1 year, but 2 years in a row is really, extraordinary. And hats off to our teachers and our scholars and principals and our parents that make all of that possible. But are we satisfied with 47%? Absolutely not. We're on a march to excellence, and you might notice that I'm wearing my wristband because
yes, I do see your wristband.
This is not a sprint. This is a marathon.
Okay.
And our educators are marathon runners, and so we train for that. We don't want to have a rookie year where we throw everything at it and don't understand why we succeeded.
Right.
We want to have a championship year. So when we talk about what our educators do, what do champions do? They have coaches, they practice, they train. They look at the data. They make changes based on the data. That's what we do as educators, and that's the reason why we've seen improvement in our academic achievement. And for me as a leader, and I've been the CEO of Fortune School for 11 years now, I tell my team what we want is like what Aretha Franklin wants. We want to rock steady, right? We want to have steady growth year after year, steady growth year after year. If we knock the ball out of the park like we have in math for the past 2 years, fantastic. But we want to be the tortoise, not the hare.
So I want to ask you a question because you have been with the CEO of Fortune for 11 years. Prior to that, you were the Secretary of Education with the Schwarzenegger administration.
Senior advisor to
Senior
Schwarzenegger,
advisor,
on
senior
education,
advisor. What do you know today, after 11 years in the job, that is different from your perspective when you were the governor's education advisor?
Yes.
What have you learned?
What I've learned is that this work takes consistency, and it also takes an incredible amount of humility in that you have to go and seek out your betters across the country who are working with your same demographic and getting results. And although we spend a lot of time in public policy giving the misery statistics and the negative weather report on how African American students and low-income students and Latino students are doing, we spend far too little time actually assessing and paying attention to and studying where they are successful. And those environments absolutely exist. And as a point of fact, many of them exist in Sacramento, and many of them exist in LA.
Give us an example, some examples in Sacramento.
In Sacramento, there are 10 schools in the state that have a majority black student population that are in the top half of student performance in the state of California. And in Sacramento, Fortune School is one of them. Oak Park Prep, PS7. These are 3 schools in Sacramento. The other ones outside of Fortune School that I mentioned are St. Hope Public Schools.
Mayor Johnson's schools.
That is correct. And you may have your critiques of St. Hope and Mayor Johnson, and every time they sneeze, they get coverage because they had a celebrity found them. But you cannot deny that they are getting results with a demographic of children for which the traditional public schools have not gotten results and have consistently struggled.
That's an interesting point, and I want to follow up on that because one of the critiques of charter schools, particularly those that are focused on African American, Latino, people of color populations, is that the rigor essentially is so strict and so controlled that I've heard critics say you're draining the joy out of the discovery of learning for young people. How do you react to that?
Yeah. So one thing I want to say is that whenever you're doing work that is significant, you're going to have your fans and you're going to have your critics. And as a leader, I embrace both, right? Because there's something to be learned from criticism of what you're doing, especially from the people who are consuming the service that you're providing. So, Fortune School, I can't speak for other school systems, but I'll speak for Fortune School. Before we ever crack a book, Scott, we do something we call setting the tone for learning. which means that we're teaching kids the policies and the procedures about how we do school. So we teach everything and assume nothing.
Give us an example.
So oftentimes when kids are in school, they raise their hand to do things that are repetitive. Like, I need to go to the bathroom. I need to sharpen my pencil. I need to pick up something off the floor. We teach kids a series of hand signals. So if you need to go to the bathroom, quietly do this. You need some water. You need to pick up something off the floor. You need to sharpen your pencil. We'll spend the first 10 days of school just teaching them how to do school. We'll teach them how to walk down the hallway. We'll teach them how to get up out of their chair. We'll teach them how to greet, because often we're visited, and what we want to have a lot by the public, we want to have bell-to-bell instruction. So when somebody comes in the classroom, oftentimes you'll see the whole class turn, right? That doesn't happen at Fortune School. What happens is that one scholar is chosen by the teacher at random, and they get up and they shake the hand of the visitor and they tell them what they're doing in the classroom right now. So we are a highly structured environment. I don't want that to be confused with militancy. We're structured. And so parents who want that structured environment will come to us, because it's not for the structure in and of itself, that we have a high degree of organization, but what setting the tone for learning allows you to do, and teaching kids routines and procedures allows you to do, is it allows you to get to the academic material. Now we're in a situation where we can have a discussion about the math, because you're not throwing a chair. Now we can have a discussion about the joy of the literature that we're reading, because we know that when Scott speaks, Margaret's going to be tracking the speaker, because we've taught everybody those skills. Those skills that we take for granted, right, as adults, like, of course I'm going to be looking at you when I speak, but you have to actually teach children those things. And so we spend a lot of energy around that, and the result is when people come and visit us, they see a very focused group of students. Now, I happen to think academic rigor is joyous. When we sent 20 students this summer to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo to an engineering camp, for a residential engineering camp for a week-long stay, and everybody in middle school and high school competed to get one of those 20 slots. When I see the pictures of the students who are engaged in that hands-on, learn-by-doing work, I see joy.
I want to focus, though, on the 10 days and teaching students how to learn and how we do things. Mm-hmm. Big thing in the press over the past couple of years has been the disparity, particularly with African American girls and boys, in terms of disciplinary action in public school. How do your statistics for suspensions and disciplinary actions stack up compared to, say, public schools?
So there was a report that was done, and I think Pedro Noguera did it. Pedro and I have something in common. We were both student body presidents at Cal. And he did a report that I think identified Sacramento as the capital of suspensions.
I remember that.
Yes. And it was talking about the school districts and some charter schools alike that have very high suspension rates. You'll notice in that report that Fortune School is not mentioned. Our suspension rate is about 3.7%, which is about the state average, but we're doing it with a African American student population that is over 60%. And that's significant because black kids in public schools in California are suspended at 3 times the rate of white kids for the same offenses.
So, and what would you say, just briefly, is your secret to success for having closed that particular gap as well?
One is that we teach kids how to do school, and we treat it like an academic subject, and that's what I'm talking about these setting the tone for learning with these procedures and such. 2 is that we teach social emotional learning. It's built into our schedule to have to teach kids social skills, and we have a curriculum for that. It's called Second Step. 3 is that we have a progressive discipline, that we publish what the rules are in terms of discipline, and go over it with parents, have them sign it, and go over it with students. 4 is that we have a system where we measure performance called Classdojo. Every kid's got an avatar. Avatar gains and loses points based on the kid's behavior, and in real time parents get those results. So every day they can say, well, how did my kid do? Well, it's very specific. This is how many times he raised his hand, this has participated. And our focus, Scott, is having more attention on the positives than the negatives. If the teacher has more negatives in that system than positives, then we're going to go to the teacher and say, wait a minute, that's not how the system is designed.
Fascinating. I hope you'll come back in the future and update us in terms of your progress.
I'd love to. Great to be with you today.
Thank you. And that's our show. Thanks to our guests, and thanks to you for watching Studio Sacramento. I'm Scott Syphax. See you next time right here on KVIE.
For over 20 years, Five Star Bank has created thoughtful solutions to help the Capital Region thrive. From economic development and education to public health and safety, issues that are vitally important to Sacramento's prosperity. We're proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
All episodes of Studio Sacramento, along with other KVIE programs, are available to watch online at kvie.org/video.